In Dynasty Fantasy Football, we have all made some great trades. We've all made some bad trades. And today, that's going to be what we're breaking down here. I've been playing Dynasty for a couple years now, 5+ years, and we are going through my best and my worst Dynasty trades of all time, talking about the lessons that we can take away from it, some of the things I did well, some of the things I did horribly wrong in this video. If you guys are Dynasty players, comment down below. What is the best trade that you've ever made? What is the worst trade you've ever made? And if you guys are Dynasty players, you're going to want to check out flockfantasy.com. We have a Dynasty trade calculator, fully customizable to your league settings. Our My Teams features allows you to import your teams and see how you stack up versus your league mates. Dynasty rankings, Dynasty trade value charts, our rookie prospect models, and tons more content over there. If that interests you, link will be down below in the pinned comment. But let's not waste any more time. Let's get right into it. All right, so like I said, this is going to be a super fun exercise. You're going to get to see me with egg on my face in some of these trades. You're going to get to see me feeling proud about some of these trades. So we're going to go kind of 5-1, the number 5 best trade I've ever made, the number 5 worst trade I've ever made, so on and so forth until we get to the best all-time and the worst all-time trade that I've ever made. So number 5, best all-time trade that I've ever made in Dynasty Fantasy Football. I made this one in August of last year in the No Flockin' League. I got Tony Pollard really late in the Dynasty startup draft in 2023. I think he was like a 9th or a 10th round pick, and I believe Mason and Danny actually broke down that startup on Mason's Dynasty Flock channel. I scooped the value, right? I thought it was a good value in the 9th, 10th round, even though I wasn't competing. I was building out a productive struggle out of the startup. So I had Tony Pollard. He was a top 15 redraft pick, and I was like trying to sell him. Nobody wanted him. And then finally in late August, I got a first rounder for him in 2025, which projects to be probably mid, maybe even early if some things break right for me. And I also got this breakout candidate by the name of Nico Collins. The deal obviously aged very well for me because Nico Collins is well more valued than Tony Pollard. And also I banked a first rounder for him. So I mean, if you're going to take away any lessons from this trade, I would say be patient because I very well could have sold low on Tony Pollard because this league market isn't very high on running backs. But I was patient. I ended up getting an insulated trade, a breakout candidate plus a first rounder. That's also a good strategy if you're trying to offload productive pieces. Aim for a breakout candidate plus a first rounder instead of just one or the other because it gives you multiple outs to actually win that trade. I won this trade via Nico Collins, but I think you could also make the argument I won this trade just based off of the first rounder alone. Based on what Tony Pollard is going for now. So that one I feel pretty good about, has me set up in a pretty good spot in the No Flockin' League, and I'm actually going to talk about another trade from that league later in this video. So number 5, worst trade I've ever made. So we go from a great trade that I made last year to a trade that I made badly last year. And this one took place in the FSC Listener Dynasty League, one of my, I think my second longest standing Dynasty League that I'm in right now. It's been going on for a couple of years. I was trying to tank my first rounder last year in this league after being competitive for like 3 or 4 years in this league. I made the finals twice, didn't end up winning any championships, which is unfortunate, but I decided to tear it down last offseason. Going into the season, I was trying to offload productive pieces. Guys like Chris Godwin, Deebo Samuel, and Zach Moss were guys that I was unable to offload before the season started. And you know those trades where the second you hit accept, you already hate it? That's exactly what happened in this trade. In principle, I think selling off of your production to tank your pick is a good strategy. I think my process was sound here. However, with Zach Moss, with Deebo Samuel, and with Chris Godwin, especially on September 18th, Zach Moss had just had 2 big weeks. Deebo Samuel, of course, was attached to one of the best offenses in the league. Chris Godwin maybe wasn't off to a hot start yet, but people believed in him as a guy that was maybe worth a late first, early second round type of value. I should have gotten a lot more than I got for these guys. I got Jonathan Mingo, who was a rookie. We didn't know anything about him yet, so I don't want to say that it was a bad trade because he face planted, because I didn't know he was going to face plant yet. He was a starter for the Carolina Panthers. I got the 110, and it was a projected late first, so I knew it was going to be late. 410 and a third in 2025. You could definitely make the argument this deal is about 2 seconds too short. Mingo was a swing, like I said. I didn't know he was going to face plant, but I also didn't think he was a great prospect. So It should have been like Jonathan Mingo, 110 and 2 2s for this package, and I panicked, right? I wanted to get these guys off of my team, and I sold them for like 70 cents on the dollar, and it was annoying me because in this league, everybody's very sharp. They've been following our content for years. They understand that you don't want to overpay for production pieces in a league market where picks are very valuable, so it kind of worked against me, and that's sometimes the problem of playing in leagues with you guys. You know exactly how I operate. That's definitely not something I'm proud of, this trade. This is one that I sold low on, and this team, of all the teams that I have, is probably in one of the worst conditions right now, due in part to trades like that one. So not a great one for me. Let's pivot into my number 4 best trade that I've made in Dynasty Fantasy Football so far, and that was during 2023 rookie drafts. It says that this pick was 107, but Sleeper kind of got jumbled a little bit because this team ended up orphaning, and then the pick switched around and stuff. This pick was 112. When I made the trade, it was Danny's first rounder that I traded away in 2024. Danny eventually won the championship in this Too Lazy to Set Lineups Best Ball League. Shit just got all jumbled, like I said. So I got Brock Purdy, a 2023 first, and I'll reveal who I picked with that first in a second. The 112 2023 second, which I believe was the 201, and then the 2024 second was my own 201. I was tanking this team, and I wasn't trying to compete in this league. So the picks that ended up, becoming of these players was in 2024, the 112 was Jonathan Brooks. So that just got spent. That just got spent this year. 201 this year was Brian Thomas Jr. This guy didn't end up making the pick because he ended up trading it away, and this person actually ended up orphaning the team altogether. And then the 2023 second, the 201 in 2023 was Michael Mayer. So I basically gave up Jonathan Brooks, Michael Mayer, and Brian Thomas Jr. And again, he didn't actually select Brian Thomas Jr. He traded that away. What I haven't told you about this trade is that the 2023 first rounder that I acquired was CJ Stroud. So I got CJ Stroud and Brock Purdy for a bunch of, 6th, 7th, 8th round startup picks at best, and then Mayer lost value. So it's basically Jonathan Brooks and Brian Thomas are the meat and potatoes of that deal. Definitely a trade that I feel very good about, and I'm going to out Spicy Hot right now because this is who I made this trade with. He eventually orphaned this team after the 2023 season because it was not in good shape after losing CJ Stroud and Brock Purdy from his quarterback core. So gonna out him that I absolutely fleeced his ass. But again, we're gonna humble myself here in a second because this next trade's not a very good one either. So number 4, worst trade that I ever made is another one of these trades that had jumbled first rounders because the team got orphaned and all that kind of stuff. But basically the trade was that I sent away Quentin Johnston, the 107 and the 207. And I made this trade, I think early October, late September area. So I already kind of got to see what Quentin Johnston looked like on an NFL field, and I wasn't impressed. I thought he was going to faceplant. Of course, he eventually did. And I wanted to sell off that 107 and the 207 because I was a competitive team, and I'm using that in air quotes. ETN was tearing it up. He was a top 5 running back in points per game. 18.4 points per game was what he was averaging at the time. Miles Sanders was getting volume in Carolina. Maybe he was going to turn things around. I was trying to make a championship push with this team, and even I knew at the time that my team wasn't good enough to win the championship. I looked around at the league, I looked at my own team, and I was like, man, I'm going to really have to run hot. Even if ETN continues what he was doing, even if Sanders bounced back, and, that pick wasn't 107 or 207, because I was assuming they were going to be late first when I traded them away and late seconds when I traded them away. It just wasn't a good trade. It was one of those things that I've seen a lot of you guys make that I always make fun of in the comments where I'm like, hey, you guys, you're not ready to compete. You don't want to go all in. I still sometimes make these mistakes myself. You get caught up in the fact that ETN was balling out. I thought I was one great running back away from competing. And to my credit, my team kind of crumbled due to injury. It wasn't really because my team wasn't totally good enough. I definitely could have ran hot and won the championship, but Justin Herbert got injured, Justin Jefferson got injured, Deshaun Watson got injured, and they started dropping like flies, and boom, I snuck into the playoffs with the 107 and the 207, and I probably lost this trade. Again, at face value, ETN is still probably worth about a late first and that kind of thing, so I didn't get killed in this trade, but it just was a kind of an amateur move. I know better. I knew I shouldn't have made this trade. It didn't feel good the second I accepted it, and definitely got unlucky to some degree, like I said, due to injury, but my gut was, let this play out. Don't force things. You're probably not ready to compete this year. My team was kind of like a house money situation, and had some of those injuries been suffered early in the season, I would have been better off. I would have had my own first and all that kind of stuff. So not a great situation for me. Number 3 best trade that I've ever made in Dynasty Fantasy Football is this one right here, where I received Hollywood Brown, a 2023 first, which I'll reveal where that ended up in a second. Matthew Stafford, James Conner, and a third is what I traded away. And I made this trade May of 2022 following the 2021 season. So Matthew Stafford had just won the Super Bowl. Conner had signed a new contract with Arizona, I believe. And looking at this deal, you might have thought, okay, maybe this guy was competitive. It was a decent deal at the time. Well, this person's team ended up being like my team from the previous example, which is his team wasn't good enough to compete. He ran really cold with injuries. His players started busting and all that kind of stuff. That pick ended up being the 102 that I received. So I got the 102 in 2023, selected Anthony Richardson with it. Thank God I didn't select Bryce Young like I probably would have in other situations. The lesson from this is obviously if your league mate is misevaluating their team, gun for their first rounder. And this guy, I saw his team when he reached out to me. He wanted Stafford, he wanted James Conner, and he thought he could compete and win a championship, and I knew he definitely couldn't. So I made it a priority to get his first rounder in this trade because I figured it was going to end up being early to mid, and he thought it was mid to late. So that's kind of something that you can take away into your dynasty trade strategy going forward, where if your league mate thinks they can compete and you know they can't, you should probably gun for their first rounder. So number 3 trade, that is the worst I've ever made. This one really, really annoys me because this was Danny that I made this trade with. So the fact that he fleeced me so hard makes me absolutely sick. You look at this trade and you're like, why the hell did I do this? Again, I want to remind you that this was December of 2022. Justin Fields was having a breakout season. He was a top 5 fantasy quarterback. Jalen Hurts obviously had a breakout season too, was a top 5 fantasy quarterback. At the time, I knew I wasn't getting a great deal. I knew I was giving up some value to get Justin Fields and get that production. But the reason I made this trade was this. Jalen Hurts was obviously crushing in 2022, but he got injured in week 14. And he didn't end up finishing out that season. And I was 13-1 with a bye in this league, number 1 seed, poised to win a championship. So what I did was I basically sacrificed some startup value and moved on from Jalen Hurts to get Justin Fields. I also got a better tight end in the process in George Kittle and a 3rd round pick of a little bit of insulation there. My team is 13-1 during the bye week. I reload during that bye week with this trade. I come into week 15 and I got smoked by the Dak Prescott CeeDee Lamb stack, and Doc also had Jerick McKinnon, a bunch of random guys that went off. So I ended up losing in basically the 2nd round of the fantasy playoffs after making this trade. The season ends, and I immediately regretted this deal because I wanted Jalen Hurts. I didn't want to move off of Jalen Hurts. The silver lining is that 2023 third that I ended up getting was a pick that I gave Danny 2 weeks earlier in a deal for some, random rookie flash in the pan named Brock Purdy. So I may have lost the original deal with Justin Fields and Jalen Hurts, and it looks definitely worse now because I was unable to move off of Justin Fields before he lost his job. And trust me, I tried. I tried to upgrade to Joe Burrow. I tried to upgrade to some other guys. At least I got Brock Purdy for that 3rd rounder, and I eventually proceeded to get the 3rd rounder back in this trade. Still not great, though. Definitely not a trade that I feel really good about. I would love to have Jalen Hurts on my team right now because I went 12-2 last year without Jalen Hurts. Lost after my bye week again. 3rd time's the charm. Hopefully I can win the championship this year, but definitely would prefer to have Jalen Hurts than I have Justin Fields sitting on my bench, not even starting for the Pittsburgh Steelers right now. The lesson here is that sometimes it's fun, arms race, put your chips into the middle, try and win a championship. Again, I was 13-1. I was the number 1 seed. If you're going to do it, it should be then when you suffer an injury like that to Jalen Hurts. But again, shoving to win a title is fun, but it's not fun if you realize the downside risk. So before you do a move like this, you got to ask yourself, are you okay if you don't win the championship? Are you okay giving up that value? And again, I sold the farm to some degree. In my defense, Justin Fields still held his value that offseason, but I should have tried to be more aggressive trying to sell Justin Fields, trying to get to a different quarterback because I didn't really believe in Justin Fields, and that's why I felt uneasy making this trade. Even at the time, I just wanted that production. So, number 2, best trade that I've ever made, and this one is semi-cheating a little bit because it was 2 trades, but it involved the same pieces, so I'm kind of lumping them together. The initial trade was this. I got Amon-Ra St. Brown, a 1st rounder, 2 2nd rounders, and a 4th rounder for A.J. Brown and a 3rd rounder. At the time, Amon-Ra St. Brown, I believe, was going in, the 5th, 6th round of redraft leagues. A.J. Brown had just gotten traded to the Philadelphia Eagles. He was going in the 3rd round of redraft leagues, so definitely aged very well for me. Amon-Ra St. Brown is more valuable than A.J. Brown straight up, and I got Amon-Ra plus a 1 and 2 2s, basically, for A.J. Brown and a 3rd. So here's the full result of this trade, because obviously in 2022 and 2023, I spent those picks. In 2022, I spent the second rounder on Tyler Algier. In 2022, I spent the fourth rounder on Kevin Harris. In 2022, the other guy spent the third rounder on Keontae Ingram, so not a really consequential piece in that trade. But in March of 2023, I took the 1 and the 2 that I got from this deal, plus Jameson Williams, and that 1 and 2 ended up being 112 and 212, by the way. So they were literally the last picks of the draft. And I traded up for Bijan Robinson. So again, J-Mo got suspended a month after I made that trade. This guy actually made the most of those picks. He ended up getting Achane and Rashee Rice with the 112 and 212. So it definitely could have been worse for him, but I'm still taking Bijan there. So the net of the 2 trades of my second best trade that I've ever made in Dynasty was I got Amon-Ra St. Brown, Bijan Robinson, Tyler Algier, and Kevin Harris for A.J. Brown, Jameson Williams, and a third-round pick that became Keontae Ingram. Because like I said, that 1 and 2 that I got in the Amon-Ra trade, I eventually moved off of with Jameson Williams to get Bijan Robinson. So again, this is a league that you're going to hear from here in a second. Part of why I've been able to rebound in this league and been able to build my team into one of the top 2 or 3 contenders this year going into the season is because of trades like this and moves like this where I've been able to go out and get some studs on the cheap. So number 2 worst trade that I've ever made in Dynasty Fantasy Football. And here's what pisses me off about this deal. You remember that trade that I made with Hollywood Brown and I got Anthony Richardson in the 102? For Matthew Stafford, James Conner, and that other piece there, my dumbass decided to sell Anthony Richardson on the low. So again, consequentially to my team, I got Anthony Richardson for such a good deal that it didn't really make a huge impact, but my team would be in such a better situation right now if I did keep Anthony Richardson. And I had 4 quarterbacks that were all being drafted as top 12 guys last offseason. Bryce Young, Justin Herbert, Anthony Richardson, and Deshaun Watson. And I decided the one guy that I was going to sell was the one that gained the most value, and 2 of those guys ended up losing a lot of value. So that definitely hurts. I chose poorly, basically. Not just in who I decided to sell, because I sold Anthony Richardson, who gained the most value, but look at the return I ended up getting. At face value at the time, I made this deal last offseason. Quentin Johnston was going off the board as the 108. Anthony Richardson was the 102. So I basically traded down from 102 to get Quentin Johnston, Jerry Jeudy, who was going in like the 4th round of underdog drafts, who was a breakout candidate. I got Roschon Johnson, who I really believed in, and I got the 207 this year, was projected to be an early to mid second and ended up being more so on the mid side. Again, did I sell low even at the time? Definitely. And I definitely regret this trade overall, and I kind of regretted it right at the time. But I will say I ran super cold with how this thing played out, because if that was instead of Quentin Johnson, I took Jordan Addison or Zay Flowers, that would obviously make the deal look a little bit better. If instead of the 4th round breakout candidate that Jerry Jeudy was, if that was Drake London or George Pickens, who were also going in the same kind of range of redraft projections, that would have made the trade a lot better. If instead of Roschon Johnson, I took Jaden Reed or Rashee Rice with that selection, or Sam Laporta with that selection, this would have looked a lot better. So I ran really cold on the players I ended up getting, but even in principle, there's a lot of lessons that I would take away from this trade. Lesson number 1, just because you have quarterback equity, and like I said, I had 4 quarterbacks that were all like top 12 to 15 guys, don't feel like you have to sell one. I didn't have to sell Anthony Richardson. I didn't have to sell any of these guys. But for some reason, I got it in my head that this league didn't value quarterbacks properly. I didn't need Richardson. And I was like, you know what? I'll just move off of these. And this is precisely the same league I made the ETN trade in too. So I thought, oh, if I sell Anthony Richardson and get some competitive assets, maybe make a trade for a running back, which I ended up doing during the season, then I could compete in this league. Again, this is how you force a house money team. Don't do what I did last offseason and do what I did in this league. Lesson number 2 is when you're evaluating which quarterback to sell of the 4 that I had, don't pick the one that can burn you the hardest, which is exactly what happened, where Richardson is worth the most, basically outside of Herbert, of the quarterbacks that I had. And again, also too, when you're selling a borderline 1st round startup pick in Anthony Richardson, like I did in this trade, get less pieces back, but better pieces. Don't trade it for 4 pieces, trade it for 2 much better pieces. Because had I sold Anthony Richardson for Jalen Waddle and Jahmyr Gibbs, then that would look a lot better than selling him for like the 108 QJ and like a 204 Roschon and all these like extra pieces. You want to trade these guys for singular assets or one or two assets that are much better if you're looking to move off of excess quarterback talent on your roster. So that is a big mistake. That is one that I definitely regret. That one hurts my ass just looking at that trade, to be honest, because my team could have been in a lot better situation in that league had I not done that and had I kept Richardson, or if I was going to sell a quarterback. If this was Bryce Young, it wouldn't look nearly as bad, or if this was Deshaun Watson, it wouldn't look nearly as bad. But even still, definitely a tough one to look at that I made just last year too. So definitely not prone to making mistakes, even making content for the last 3 or 4 years. The best trade that I've ever made. Let's get into the number one best trade and number one worst trade that I've ever made all time. Jared, cover your eyes on this one because this took place in our No Flock and League, same league that I made the Tony Pollard for Nico Collins in a first trade. I get CJ Stroud for a bunch of nobodies that are worth nothing right now, that are 15th to 20th round startup assets. So now I have, checks notes, Josh Allen and CJ Stroud in this league. And this is the same league that I stole Nico Collins, like I mentioned. So I have CJ Stroud and Nico Collins stacked up now. Jared is a Commanders fan, and it looks like I took advantage of some Sam Howell hopium on his part because I liked Sam Howell last offseason. You guys know I still like Sam Howell at his current value. But I sold off Sam Howell, Dameon Pierce, who unfortunately lost a shit ton of value from now to last offseason. But man, this was a bad trade even at the time. When he made this trade, everybody in the chat was like, you just gave away CJ Stroud for nothing. And it looks even worse now because Dameon Pierce dropped about 10 rounds of startup value from where he was going last year. Sam Howell dropped about 5 to 10 rounds of startup value, and Tyler Scott wasn't really worth anything to begin with. So that is my all-time best dynasty trade that I've ever made. I got a top 3 to 5 startup pick for basically a bunch of slappies there. Now let's get into my all-time worst dynasty trade of all time. This might have been the moment you guys were waiting for. From one fleece to another. April 30th, 2020, the worst dynasty trade I have ever made. In fact, the second dynasty trade in my entire time playing Dynasty. So when I say I've learned from bad trades, just like you guys probably have when you started playing Dynasty, this is precisely the one I'm pointing to. My first ever Dynasty League, I got bent so hard in this league that I felt it for 2 to 3 years until now, after the Bijan trade and after the Amon-Ra trade where my team is competitive. It is wild that I was still in the championship in 2023 after this one. Jameis Winston, Devontae Parker, Christian McCaffrey, and Devin Singletary is what I received on April 30th, 2020. What I gave up is the 101 Josh Allen, DK Metcalf, Joe Mixon, and a 2020 first-round pick, which became Cam Akers at the time. And it could have been worse because Justin Herbert was the very next pick. This one was just so bad on so many fronts. Again, at the time, I'll try and rationalize what I was thinking here. Christian McCaffrey just had a legendary season, right? It was right after the 2019 season. Christian McCaffrey was the belle of the ball, the 101 in startups, absolutely unstoppable fantasy asset. Devontae Parker's 2019 season, pretty solid. He was like a top 15 receiver in points per game. Jameis Winston had his 30-30 season where he was actually a productive fantasy quarterback. Devin Singletary was a young running back who was starting for the Buffalo Bills. Joe Mixon proceeded, after I traded him, proceeded to have a bunch of RB1 seasons in a row. I knew I was giving away a good running back there, so it's not like I was surprised by that. DK Metcalf was a second-year projected breakout candidate, and I really believed in Metcalf, so this was a stupid move on my part. I really didn't want to put him into this deal. Josh Allen, at the time, was not thought of to be a stud quarterback. We all thought he was, he's inaccurate. Is he really going to be this great guy? He was like a 5th or a 6th round startup pick, similar to like maybe Will Levis or Bryce Young right now. It just so happens that he's currently the 101 in Dynasty and has been for a while. And then the 2021, like I said, one of the best draft classes we've seen in the last 15 years, and I gave up a first-round pick that very easily could have turned into worse than Cam Akers. It could have turned into Lamb, Jefferson, Herbert. All of those guys were on the board when this guy took Akers with this pick. So one of the worst dynasty trades I've ever made. In fact, the worst dynasty trade that I've ever made. Bought high on everybody on the left and sold low on everyone on the right. The lesson from this trade is do not give your league mate this many outs to win a trade over you. And also, don't spend this much on a running back as well. Like, I sold the farm for a running back in Christian McCaffrey, who at the time wasn't really old yet. He was like 24 years old. But still, when it's a running back, you do not want to sell quarterback equity, young wide receiver equity, another good running back, young running back who was a top 10 guy in Dynasty, and Joe Mixon, plus first-round capital. Worst Dynasty trade I've ever made, and I have come hopefully a long way since I made that one. So, If you guys enjoyed this video, if you got some value from it, if you've been laughing at me this whole time for some of the bad trades and maybe celebrating some of the good trades, thankfully, it was way easier to find good trades than it was to find bad trades. But yeah, this one is an all-timer. So leave a like down below if you guys enjoyed. Subscribe to the channel if you are new around here. And again, if you want access to all of our Dynasty content, rankings, Superflex, one quarterback, best ball as well. If you guys are playing best ball drafts over on Underdog Fantasy, our rookie rankings, our rookie draft guide, our Dynasty rookie prospect models, the running back and the wide receiver one. I just dropped the running back one the other day. Tons of great feedback on that. And also trade value charts. And like I said, the trade calculator and also the My Teams feature where you can load all your sleeper IDs in and see all your teams relative to your league mates. That is all available on flockfantasy.com. Use the promo code FSE when you sign up for 30% off, 7 days for free. Also, you get a free team review voucher when you sign up annually as a mother flocker using promo code FSE. I'll break down like a 5, 6, 7 minute podcast basically just on your team using our My Teams feature and talk about, you know, how your team is looking, how the rest of your league is looking, who you should trade for, who you should trade away, what you should do with your rookie picks, all that kind of stuff. Basically, your own personal Dynasty Decisions episode when you sign up for an annual mother flocker subscription using code FSE. So if that interests you, check it out down below in the description. But with that being said, peace out, and we'll talk to you soon.